That's dumb. They're dumb. And here's the issue is that they do, like I trained to be a pilot and I'm a 737 pilot. I went through the training. The training is someone shows you a PowerPoint slide saying, if you are a co-pilot and the captain does something wrong, you need to speak up about it. That's all. That's the training. And they talk about some crashes that happened, but they don't do anything that makes it stick emotionally.
That's Canadian comedian Nathan Fielder. He's the man behind the HBO series The Rehearsal, and that's him responding to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, over their response to the criticisms he leveled towards the aviation industry in the most recent season of his program. That series, The Rehearsal, takes a look this year at the pressures that pilots face behind closed doors, the lack of communication between pilots, and it shines a light on how mental health struggles in aviation often go unspoken. Now, it was a few weeks back that we had John Gradek on the show. Of course, John comes on all the time to talk about aviation and aviation-related issues. And when he was on, I said, John, have you seen this season of The Rehearsal? And basically, we ended up giving him homework. And John is on the line here. Hey, John, how you doing?
Good morning, Elias.
You went out, you did the homework. You watched season 2 of The Rehearsal since it deals with aviation and accidents involving airplanes. So first things first, thanks for watching the show so we could talk about it.
My pleasure. It was difficult to watch it, and it was and I had to do the first time I went through it, I had to stop halfway through. I think I went to episode 3, and I said, I don't know. This is not real. This is not what we normally happens in aviation pilot training. And then I picked it up again, and it took me a couple of hours to basically get myself back into the mode of looking at it. But I did finish it, and guess what? Yeah. I did it twice.
You did it? Okay, you watched. So, but I want to ask you this, because you said it was tough to watch. And I wonder if you're talking about, because Nathan, like I said, Nathan Fielder, he's a comedian, right? And he does awkward, that's his shtick, is like the most awkward TV of all time. Are you saying it was difficult because it's an awkward show, or difficult because of the content?
I think it was the content. I seen his shtick before, so I know who he is, and I think that what got to me when I first saw it was that he was kind of trivializing, in my opinion, the whole concept of pilot communication. And I think that, to me, he was kind of demeaning the roles of pilots and how pilots interact, and what the end result was of pilot communication in instances where you have airplane crashes. And I think that, to me, kind of said, wait a second, we're going down a path that comedy might not have a place to play in this exercise.
So I find it so interesting because here we are talking about it, and I think there has been a discussion because of this TV series about certain issues that we don't often talk about, like pilot communication, and there always seems to be some element often in certain plane crashes where pilot communication does come up. So let me just ask you this, okay? What he alleges that the training that pilots get on how to talk to each other, co-pilot to pilot, to bring up issues, right, to bring up mistakes, he says that's an issue. What would you say on that allegation? Does he have a point there?
I don't think he does. I think that, the discussion, and the fact that he basically says you have a junior person and a senior person in an aircraft cockpit, is a function of the industry, of how we've designed the industry. We have one person in charge of the aircraft, and that's the captain. And that captain basically is the individual to whom takes all accountability for anything that happens on that airplane. The first officer on an airplane, yes, is secondary to the pilot, and is there to ensure that all of the activities taking place in a cockpit are done normally, and is there to relieve the captain in instances where there's a requirement for relief. But the captain is the individual that is fully accountable by regulations for the operation of that aircraft. So yes, there is a peer structure within the aircraft cockpit. The question is, in Fielder's mind, does that peer structure really inhibit, discussion of situations that are happening in the cockpit that could lead to a crash?
Now,
And that's where I say, I'm saying, we're all human beings, and we all have good days, we all have bad days, we all have situations of, things that are going on in the back of our mind as we, in fact, do our jobs. And do some of those things kind of creep in to the professionalism associated with that job? Occasionally they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where psychologically we have to basically manage the environment in that cockpit to make sure that, flying the airplane safely and taking care of those passengers is a number one priority, and everything else gets put on the back seat. So that sometimes happens.
So to that end, right, one of the other things that this show focuses on is pilot mental health. And the way they put it in the series is that if a pilot were to dare say that he's having mental health issues and speak up and talk about it, he'd be pulled off of flying. So nobody speaks up about it. Is there anything there?
Yeah, I think there is. I think, and I found that piece interesting, where you basically had his famous, it was an fMRI that he did that talked a bit about a whole bunch of different characteristics of your mental health to get examined.
That's like the pilot for our listeners. That FM, whatever the acronym you use, that's the test that pilots do on their mental health. What is just to describe that?
Yeah, that's an advanced MRI that supposedly is able to detect psychological issues and things like I think Fielder was really looking at autism, and can you detect autism with this technology? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, and far be it for me to be an expert in MRIs and what fMRIs are all about. I think the jury's still out as to whether that's an effective test to do or not. I think that psychologists among the medical community would be in a better position to really understand, can we in fact look at mental health being detected by technology? And I think there's an issue there, but he has a point. If you self-report a mental concern that you might have in terms of, I didn't sleep well last night, or I had problems financially, or I got marital problems or stuff like that that's going on around my life, and it may affect my capability as a pilot. You report that, you basically are taken off the line.
And there you go. And who doesn't want to do their job, right? So we're with John Gradek from McGill University, faculty lecturer of operations and integrated aviation management. John, I want to move this forward because we recently had a horrific crash, the Air India crash that happened, where everyone, all passengers save one, passed away in that crash. And now we've got the black box recordings, a story from the Wall Street Journal about the black box recordings. It suggests the captain switched off fuel to both engines shortly after takeoff. And you had the co-pilot who was quite panicked in that black box recording. I'm thinking about that series, then I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about pilot mental health and pilots not talking to each other, and then I'm thinking about this crash. What do we know now on this Air India crash?
I don't think we know much more than what you just described in terms of the transcription that was released by the Indian investigative authorities. Like we didn't get the full, audio of that conversation, so they kind of just transcribed it. So I'm not sure whether they've fully disclosed the events of that in that cockpit. They just did some excerpts. Mm-hmm. and put into and transcribes what they heard. So to me, as an investigator, if I was an investigator, I want to hear the real thing. I want to hear the tape, not somebody's interpretation of what they hear on the tape. So there's a lot of work that has to be done on that crash. There's a lot of people making some assumptions about what happened and how it happened. Mm-hmm. For those two switches to be pulled within 1 second, in my opinion, humanly impossible. So, it's really, a function of, go back and really look at how those valves got turned off to feed fuel to the engines. Was it mechanical? Was it electronic? There's a whole bunch of hypotheses that are around about how that happened. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done to really come down to the root cause of that crash.
John, I got to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on this morning.
My pleasure, and thanks for the. If any other show you want me to have a look at and review for you, I'll be more than happy to do it.
I'll think about that, John. Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.
That's John Gradek from McGill University.